Hi, welcome to Geeks 2.
I'm Maya.
I'm Keith, and we're talking about comics from an older perspective.
Yes, and this week is going to be more of an overview of how we at least see Lois Lane, because over the years we've had conversations with people, various settings, about the importance of the character and her purpose in the story. And a lot of times, which always surprises me, people don't see her value to the larger mythology. And I think that's a mistake. And I actually think that's what happened post-Flashpoint with New 52 and the Superman storylines that they did. I think by not understanding her deeper role in the story, sidelining her the way that they did, it caused problems to the foundation of the story. And that's what I think, at least, went wrong.
Yeah. Lois has been part of the Superman story from the very beginning. She is the only factor, other than Superman and Clark Kent, that was embedded from the very beginning. Krypton had no name. The newspaper was the Daily Star. The editor didn't have a name and eventually became George Taylor. There were no Kents, no parents on Krypton, just the basic mythology of baby comes from another planet, and now we have Superman. That was it. So Lois has been a key component of the storyline since then. She's inseparable, and I think the story really goes wrong anytime anybody does try to separate her from it. Not to say that you can't have stories without her, just that the overall arc and theme of the series is she's part of it.
Yeah, I mean, right. I mean, it's not that he can't go off and do, they both of them can't go off and do their own things, but I think her purpose is goes beyond what she's often dismissed for, damsel in distress. She's just a girlfriend. Not that there's anything wrong with being the girlfriend, and she's definitely not a damsel in distress unless the whole planet is one big humanity in distress because he's saving everybody. Jimmy Olsen with the signal watch. But I think her purpose really from the beginning has been this narrative bridge between the disguise of Clark Kent, because he was put together as a disguise. He was not the personality. And Superman, the superhero of the story. And even in Action 1, when you look at this, you can see Clark Kent's purpose of being this weakling back then that was not looked upon fondly. When he doesn't step in to defend her, now we think it's no big deal. I mean, why should she need him to defend her? But remember, this was 1938. And this was
A milquetoast was a social pariah.
Yes, you look at the old movies. Watch a Humphrey Bogart movie. Watch His Girl Friday. Watch any of those movies, and the milquetoast guy is the one who everyone is making fun of, and is not the person that anyone would aspire to be. And the readers back then knew it. And the narration of Action 1 tells us this, that if, in case you don't know, reluctantly he adheres to his disguise. And he's cheering her on when she punches out the mobsters, because that's not feminine behavior back then, but it was good for you, Lois. And I think that gets lost in our modern day rereading of this. We lose context of what was happening then.
And context is everything. As the stories developed, for the first few issues after Action 1, Superman would do things apart from the newspaper. So Lois wasn't there, and Clark wasn't even there. He would appear in civilian clothes just as a general disguise. He would basically, to give the artist the big Superman reveal. He would even take other identities. He would sub for a football player. He took an identity as a miner to expose a crooked mining operation. It wasn't until Lois came back into it that we started to have the grounding of Clark Kent working in tandem with the Superman identity to further his cause of social justice. And that's what Superman did at the beginning. He wasn't pushing planets around and taking out supervillains.
He wasn't flying.
Yeah. He was interested in helping people. That's what he was trying to do. And as reporters, that's what they were doing as well.
Right, and her purpose there was, you know, twofold too, as the bridge, and also to give that friendly competition that was going on between them. So they had that energy there, and then he has to also come up with his, you know, gotta go, you know, water the plants or whatever it is excuse that he needed to do to get away and turn into Superman. So there was a lot. There was her role was so complex in the beginning, and then
by the third year, Lois and Clark, rather than Lois looking at him as an ant, an insect, they were partners, and she, while she wanted to get the byline, she did respect him as a reporter.
Yes.
And so we're moving to a closer relationship for the two. And it was when DC management started getting into their tussles with Siegel and Schuster and pulling it away from them and trying to stagnate the character so that not even the illusion of change was being used, that we started getting them locked into stereotypical roles.
Right, and I mean that K-Metal story that is all over the internet of what they wanted to do but weren't allowed to do, is an interesting, if nothing, just an interesting historical look at where it could have gone but didn't, and part of it is understandable because you want, this is a profit-driven industry, right? So they need something where they're thinking, okay, I need to keep it just this way so I can get all the money I can, but
got to keep them coming back every month.
Yeah, right. And but I think they did even without allowing for evolution, it still was somewhere where Lois was treated with dignity and respect for the most part throughout until the Silver Age. Mm-hmm. And then all bets are off. And I think the character is still stuck with that stereotype of the Silver Age. When people talk about her, they talk about her in this dismissive, again, girlfriend, damsel in distress, because Superman's girlfriend, Lois Lane book, right?
Marriage hungry, just wants to trap her man.
Yes, right. And that's there's this panel where she's just hoping that she can trap Superman into marrying her, and you're just, why? And she turned into like a funhouse mirror caricature of who the character was up to that point. You put her in front of a distorted mirror and you get that. All of her strengths get now turned into, these flaws where all she wants to do is, that's her ambition in life, marry him. Yeah. And then once it's over, it's like, that's it, I'm done, I'm married. And that goes back to the 50s in general. I mean, you watch all these movies, Pillow Talk and all of these things. A career girl is treated like, oh, you're just this poor, frustrated career girl who needs a man, because back then, right, that was it. You had to be married for the women. And these poor
worse than that, Lois became Lucille Ball.
Yeah.
It wasn't just screwball comedy, it was total screwball for Lois.
Yeah. And and then it's taken, I still don't think she's recovered from it, but it's
in public perception.
In public perception. But I also think in historical context too, because I still think people just look at her and don't understand the purpose of the character, and look at her and think, she's expendable, she's replaceable. She's a trophy wife. She's she's just put any other girl in there and it'll be fine. He can be the bachelor and have his time to be free. It's that 50s mentality. He's got to be free and be a bachelor, swinging bachelor, so he can have some fun. So,
and if she's career oriented, then she's annoying and a shrew.
Yeah, and that's that perception that, and even the way it's still sometimes written, I see that and I'm like, why in 2017 are we still walking down that road? But I think when I talk about, or think about her purpose, I think that there's a larger purpose, her larger reason for being, that playing off of each other, the reporters together, the bridge between Superman and Clark Kent that gives you, through her eyes, the Daily Planet life, and then also as she's running around trying to get her story, which is half the time why she's in trouble. She doesn't just get in trouble like Perils of Pauline, someone ties her up to the train track. She's out there actively getting a story, then gets in trouble, and he saves her. So it ties it all together. It ties the story into the larger story, to the Daily Planet, to everything, Daily Star, whatever, all the things that were happening, with her going off into danger trying to find her story, and then him coming in, and half the time he came in because he was working on the story too, and he's like, oh, oops, gotta get involved.
It's a real earmark, I think, of a writer who doesn't get Lois, that in the stories she's dismissed or written badly, usually dismissed. Even before the New 52, editorial and writers had started taking her out of the story, and the stories weren't good, sales were falling, and somehow they blamed Lois even though she wasn't in the stories.
Yeah, right. that whole walking around grounded thing, she was hardly even there. It's like, how is it her fault that the sales are dropping? The sales are dropping is because the story is kind of going nowhere. And that's the same thing with the New Krypton stories. The actual premise I thought was really interesting. Take him out of Earth, put him on New Krypton. He's never been part of his own people and culture. Who is he inside? This would be a great exploration of coming from somewhere else, being immersed into what you would have been had events gone differently, and see what's going on. But it was told through the bird's eye view of politics and Zod, and it was, who cares? I didn't get anything from Superman. He was just one big cardboard cutout there. Do you miss pizza? Do you miss, Ma? Do you miss Lois? Do you miss anything? Nothing. And
it was a story that could have been told with anybody.
Yeah.
You just set it up as anonymous science fiction characters, and you got the same story.
Yeah, it just had
it wasn't Superman.
No, and there was nothing from him. It was like just one big, black box of nothing. And I think that's why it didn't work, because we really didn't see anything new from him at all. And so that was a problem. So, then when they redid it, I think I've always felt that they just thought, oh, this is an opportunity to do what we did to Steve Trevor post-crisis. We can sideline him. We'll age him out. Someone said to me, you're lucky that they didn't age Lois out and he got married to Jimmy. I said married to Perry. They could have done what they did to Steve Trevor. And I just think that, again, shows a fundamental lack of understanding of the foundation. You get rid of her, you're pulling out part of the foundation of the story. And you made a really good point about this reborn with Nixie.
Yeah, we have Reborn recently, the last 2 months, 4-part story restoring more traditional Superman and connection with Lois. In fact, it restores the marriage from pre-Flashpoint. The marriage isn't the critical issue.
No, I didn't care about marriage.
Yeah, it's the fact that Superman and Lois are together. Not even in
dating,
relationship. Just they working together.
Yeah.
But
her presence is there because it's important on so many levels.
But there's a point where Mixie, Mr. Mxyzptlk, takes on the voice of the editors of DC for the past several years, when he's saying, "Hey, I don't get it, but hey, that's just the way it is. You two are together. You work together.
Exactly. You read
You
it.
separate them, you don't work."
And you read that, and you just start laughing, and you can just see it. It's like, this is like breaking the fourth wall, isn't it?
Yeah.
And what I would say...
That was very meta.
Yeah, that was very meta. And I think you read that and you say, well, then go back, read Action 1 Superman from the 30s, read the whole history of it, and you'll see why. There's this whole history of why it works, and there's also pockets of when they try the same thing. Let's see if we can move her out of here and just focus on this, and it never works. And she's always brought back into it. You know, they did it at the end of the Bronze Age when they moved her aside and they brought in Lana. And they did the whole thing. Then whatever happened to the Man Tomorrow does this again, where they're like, okay, we're gonna have to it's like the Horta in Star Trek. They split apart and then they meld back together. There's a reason why they were created together, and it just because she provides that purpose of giving context and depth into his two lives. She's that foil. She provides that. Whereas the other characters can't do it. Jimmy Olsen can't do it because, as you said,
he's a subordinate.
Yeah.
He's not a polished reporter, so he's not on equal footing with Clark. As in his history as being either cub reporter, or as photographer, or even full-fledged reporter. He's out. In his own series in the 50s and 60s, he was out there. Not because he was a top-notch reporter, but because he was trying to become a top-notch reporter, which is why he kept getting in trouble and having to be saved by Superman. Even had the signal watch.
Talk about damsel in distress.
Yeah.
Where is his labeling with derision? Yeah. Hey, Jimmy Olsen.
He gets a pass. Lois doesn't.
Yeah, it's like, why? I've never understood that. Whenever I hear damsel in distress, I'm like, the poster child is Jimmy Olsen. He had the watch.
Yeah.
But...
Lois never needed a watch.
Yeah, she didn't need a watch.
She wasn't as helpless as Jimmy.
Yeah, exactly. She usually used to try to get out of it.
Sorry, Jimmy fans.
And I think that's why in the New 52, I really think they started to realize that getting rid of some sort of connection to his Clark Kent life was a problem, because they completely sidelined Lois. She wasn't really part of anything, neither life. And so they brought in Jimmy Olsen to try to provide that bridge, and it didn't work because the subordinate issue, and it's just the purposes were different. That he wasn't competing with Clark or working with Clark for the same story. You didn't have two reporters with very different styles, and that's another thing that's really important, is that odd couple aspect to it, which you still see in everything. Starsky and Hutch, any buddy cop movie, any buddy show, be it a man and a woman, Mulder and Scully, be it anybody who have that odd couple aspect to it. And of course, when it's when it was men and women, it would also bring the added sexual tension. But now you have men and men, and it can, and women, because we're living in an enlightened age. So her purpose is deeper than I think a lot of people give credit for, and I think again they've learned that lesson. We saw through Mixie's eyes. I don't get it, but here it is. We'll fix it.
Yeah. I honestly laughed when I read that, because like I said, it was so meta. It was just absolutely the voice of editorial.
Yeah. So it's just, but it's not to say that these people can't, go off and in their youth and figure out, date other people, do other things. That has never been. I think that's never been at least my problem.
Yeah, it's not a shipping problem.
Yeah.
Preferably they're together, but from our perspective,
right?
But that's honestly not what the mechanics of the mythos is about.
Right. I agree, and I think it's
and DC's a shared universe, but having another hero as a confidant, having Batman as a confidant, or having Wonder Woman as a romantic interest, it's a shared universe, but they're also separate. They were created separately. Their stories have different voices.
Correct.
And
exactly.
they can be mixed for an adventure, but when you start getting into the nuts and bolts, they don't mesh.
No, and I think that was the biggest problem with the Wonder Woman Superman relationship, is because their worlds are so different. Their reasons are so different that when you put them together, first of all, now you've lost Clark Kent, because they're both two heroes. What's a purpose, right? He's doesn't even need to be Clark Kent, because he's not. He's Superman with her, and she doesn't need to go live in an apartment and live a normal life. She's got her life, and that's to me why I always liked Steve Trevor, and I was so irritated post Crisis when they aged him out, because I think that in itself, to me, which is a completely different conversation, gives a gender role flip that has always fascinated me. What does a military man who's so used to being on the front line, saving everybody, have to? What does it do to you when you're taught in a culture that manliness, that you have to step back and let this girl come and who's much stronger than you stand in the front line in front of Darkseid? His emotional impact and is very different to what Lois's would be when Superman does it, because we've all been brought up in very different to think differently about situations like that.
And that's something that was never really explored with Steve Trevor.
No.
Moulton's original concept, for good or ill, focused more on a looser relationship that had to be muted down for consumption of children.
Yes.
But those were things that really weren't explored with him. And then when Kanigher took over in the 50s, again, it was very stereotypical post-World War II women on the workforce backlash, where, hey, marry me and I'll take you away from all the superhero crap.
Yeah, exactly. And you would see that in those Wonder Woman stories too. It's like she would be like, if I marry Steve Trevor, I can, do I give this up? And the idea was that she would, which makes no sense.
At least that was always Steve's point of view.
Yeah, that was always his point of view.
And frequently it was hers, because she would say that's why she can't marry him. Her job's not done yet.
Yes. Right. And
once my job's done, then I can marry.
Yes. And it's like, no. And it's hard to look back on that now. I mean, I think for us, we have the perspective that our parents grew up in that. So we remember women's lib in the 60s and 70s. Mm-hmm. Helen Reddy's I Am Woman, Hear Me Roar. All that stuff was just what we were like 7, 8, all of these things were happening all around us. The people that are younger than us don't have that perspective, because their parents were the agitators of the 60s and 70s. Their parents are the boomers, or our age. Whereas we have the parents who are now in their 80s, who would have been little kids reading Superman comics when it first came out. So I think it's a different perspective when you look at these things, and context, historical context. But I think to go back to the Lois issue, is that thinking that her purpose is interchangeable with a love interest, or interchangeable with a Jimmy Olsen can take the place over there at the Daily Planet, and Wonder Woman can take the place over here. So basically, two different people to take one person's, purpose. It doesn't work, because they were created together for a.
It's part and parcel of the entire concept.
Yep.
And you remove Lois, you remove half the concept.
Yep. And you remove some of the foundations, like playing Jenga, and you pull it, and it's like, oops. It's like it's all in pieces. And then you have Mixie going, I don't get it. I'm like, well, if you hadn't pulled that piece, it wouldn't have fallen apart. But, so anyway, I mean, this is like our perspective of it, and I know other people feel differently, so I'm just not gonna, I just think the part of Lois being important to the story and the foundation of the story, time and time again, there's evidence to point to that. The shipping thing, I'm staying out of.
Yeah.
I mean, Clark and Lois has always been my OGP, but you know,
and I agree on that. But if you wanna throw Lana in there, or Wonder Woman, or Maxima, or anybody else, that's or Batman. That's entirely up to you. But the concept itself needs Lois.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think what they think that in order to try these different pairings out, she needs to not be there at all. Because she does stand there like the iceberg for the Titanic, right? Because everybody's like, well, Lois is there. As soon as Lois comes into anything, like Smallville and, any media, as soon as her face pops up, everybody throws their hands up going, it's over, I know how the story goes. So, and that's a problem, and I agree with it. And that's a problem. And that's why sometimes when you tell stories of his youth, that, her not being there, like Smallville, and I kind of understood why there was such, annoyance when they brought in Lois Lane from people who were shipping either him with Chloe or Lana, but I understood the irritation, because I would have felt it too if I was shipping them. I wasn't. I was just waiting for Lois to show up, and Lois shows up. I'm like, okay, no.
Yeah, see, I wasn't expecting Lois to show up in Smallville, because that was just way too early in the mythos. But it turned out to be, for me, some of the best. But it worked,
some of the best live action.
It saved the show.
Yeah, I think so. I think her relationship with Clark has been the best live action I've ever seen, because it makes them equals. Clark is not, you don't feel sorry for Clark when she says things, because he says things right back to her. So I thought they handled that really, really, really well. But anyway, could go on all day.
We could, but we're not.
No, we won't. So
that wraps up another installment of Geeks.
Yep. And hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we're working with two other fellow Geeks to do a review of the Who Killed Lucy Lane Superman Girlfriend books. It finishes up in the Jimmy Olsen, which is my favorite part of the whole story. I can't wait until we get there, because I love it. It's so bizarre. And then after that, like we said, we've got Triple Threat coming up in May. So
Triple Threat, and
we're gonna go see Guardians of the Galaxy too. So
Galaxy, the Wonder Woman movie's coming, and all sorts of fun things.
Yeah, all sorts of fun things are coming. So we'll just sit here and chit chat about them, and hopefully entertain ourselves and you, maybe, hopefully. Anyway, thanks.
Bye.
Bye.